All right, guys, Murph's here, and today we're going to do another little comparison. We're going to compare PCCs, or pistol caliber carbines, to shotguns for defensive or duty type purposes. Now, guys, longtime viewers of the channel will note that I've done quite a few of these videos. I have done semi-automatic rifles versus shotguns, if you're interested in that, link in the description. Lever action rifles versus shotguns, if you're interested in that, link in the description. And here recently, handguns versus shotguns. Today, we're taking a look at a pistol caliber carbine in the same method that we've been looking at everything else. So we'll do a couple of drills and all that type of stuff. Now let's go ahead and get some caveats out of the way. When it comes to drills, guys, I do different drills every time it is that I do these comparisons. The idea here is not to build this comprehensive body of knowledge that you guys can reference and then compare all those types of things. All the shooting that I do now is for the channel. So that is also my time to train. That's my time to be able to get in reps and all that kind of stuff. So I switch up the drills quite frequently so that I can hit different things as part of my own like training and development and all that kind of stuff. In addition to that, on this particular range day, it was incredibly windy. So that kind of had some impacts on some decisions that were made and how things played out. We'll talk about that more once we get there. Now, let's go ahead and start getting into our comparison portion, starting off with introducing the players. So, representing PCCs will be this Aero Precision EPC 9 chambered in 9mm. This is an AR9 that I built out as part of my EDC kit, which if you're interested in a video on that, go ahead and check out the link in the description to my EDC setup. Okay. And then also this Benelli M1014 on loan to the channel, which the review for this shotgun is coming up. I just happen to have it available now and went ahead and ran it for this particular video. All right, so with that, why don't we go ahead and get into the comparison type aspect, our contextual discussion on why you might pick a PCC over a shotgun. And keep in mind, guys, this is not necessarily to give you my preferences or anything along those lines, as much as give you enough data in order to be able to make a decision for yourself or possibly change your mind on a decision that has already been made. All right, so first off, when it comes to the PCCs, we'll talk about pros and cons. PCCs are smaller. As we can see here, my EPC 9 is 2/3 the length of that Benelli, and I also have a side folding adapter on this one, so it gets even smaller. It gets to at that point. Now, Murph, not all PCCs are that small. Some people run 16-inch PCCs. That makes no sense to me. I have zero interest in a 16-inch PCC. While you do have some velocity gain, there's always a trade-off between velocity gained in barrel length and then also the weight that that barrel length brings, as well as its portability and all that kind of stuff. This is a compact, easy, handy little setup. This one specifically is an SBR, but you could go the pistol route. Like as you can see here, I still have a pistol brace on this particular gun. That is because like I had it on there originally, and it kind of fits better into my backpack with this brace. At some point, I will replace it with a stock because either way, I mean, it is an SBR. I might as well have the more stable shooting platform. That's beside the point. Whenever it is that you're talking about any cartridge, there's a limit to how much barrel length will help. Every cartridge casing only holds so much powder. You can only load it up with so much propellant, which means that eventually you will run out of the ability for those expanding gases to be able to continue to generate more velocity. So we talk about optimum barrel lengths and all that kind of stuff quite frequently. Whenever it comes to the 300 blackout, everyone talks about it's like, oh, 9.5 inches is the optimal barrel length for 300 blackout. For a 5.56, it's 20 inches. In a 9mm, when you get around the 10.3 inch barrel length, that is when you stop seeing as much of an increase in velocity beyond that point. You still have an increase, but it's not enough to actually change anything. So I'm not a fan of 16-inch anything in a pistol caliber because I want something more compact and handy whenever it is that I'm running a pistol caliber carbine. And that becomes the advantage here. And we get that same type of thing with an MP5 or any of the offerings from B&T or the CZ, Scorpion, SIG, MPX. We can get those in very compact setups with barrels even shorter than this one. So our PCC is going to be able to be smaller. Now, of course, I can get small shotguns too, Murph. Like, you can absolutely do that. You can get, you can get NFA item shotguns just as readily as you can get anything else. And keep in mind that, like, yes, we're using the Benelli 1014 as our example, but we're not stuck to just talking about the Benelli 1014. This is not a comparison between the 1014 and the Aero Precision EPC 9. So, Murph, I can go way shorter on a shotgun if I'm not bothered by an NFA item, or if, I go with, like, some of any other weapons or whatever it is that you may be going after. And yes, absolutely, you can do that, but that comes with a trade-off, and that trade-off is capacity. So one of the biggest limiting factors of a shotgun is that this gun, for all of its length, holds 9 rounds, and that's with ghost loading. This gun, with all of its length, takes Glock magazines, and I can run anything from a 10-round Glock 26 mag all the way up to the 33-round stick mags, and doesn't get any longer. The reloading aspect of shotguns is also incredibly problematic when you get into a handling type aspect, because most shotguns are tubular magazine fed, because the detachable box magazine fed shotguns are not as reliable. So the process of reloading this shotgun is quite in depth. There's a lot of stuff that goes on with that. It's not a super simple just swap out a magazine type deal, unlike that of an AR-9 or anything very similar. Now, even like an MP5 probably has the least efficient reloading system of any PCC. However, it is still faster than taking this shotgun from empty to full. We're going to talk about that more once we get into the shooting portion here, but a lot of your manual of arms, whenever it comes to a shotgun, they're very gross movements. They require a lot of action. This is where people like to talk about how, like, well, shotguns are super simple. You can just hand them to somebody and they're able to run them. Well, that is what I call simple complexity. So yes, the shotgun is a very simple operation. However, I have to manipulate it more. There are more procedures and techniques that I have to employ in order to be able to keep this gun running in a fight, which is not necessarily the same for something that does have an efficient manual of arms like this EPC 9, because this EPC 9 even gives me last shot hold open just like an AR. So I have all of the advantages of AR handling characteristics with none of the disadvantages of a shotgun's manual of arms. That's pretty fantastic. Now, of course, there are other options out there that are equally well set up, but not exactly like AR manual of arms. So the CZ P07, or excuse me, P07, just jumped into handguns there for a second. The CZ Scorpion 100% has the ability for ambidextrous controls. It has a bolt release. It has a well-placed magazine release, all those types of things, and makes it incredibly easy to be able to keep that weapon system in the fight, just like Strybog, SP9, I think we're on the 3 now, and so on and so forth. All of those are going to be more beneficial from a manual of arms standpoint than any shotgun at all. All right, so there's reloading and manual of arms in general. Let's go ahead and talk about, coming back to the size thing, getting into like CQB and all that kind of stuff. The shotgun has long been praised and hailed as this fantastic CQB option. Something that you can very quickly clear rooms with and all that kind of stuff. And I don't entirely know where it is that comes from, because if you're working in extreme confined spaces, this shotgun's not helpful. I was actually practicing doing some room clearing with it in my spare time yesterday, and the amount that I have to break this shotgun down in order to be able to make it through a doorway without telegraphing myself and breaking that threshold too early is pretty severe. It's kind of the same thing like whenever people talk about like, oh, well, we used M16A2s for room clearing for years. And like, yes, and they were terrible at it because you had to break that gun down up over your shoulder. And then if you came in through that threshold, made that turn into the short corner, and there was a dude there, you were going to have to take a low probability shot at that point. Now, at that distance, is that big of a deal? No, not really. But if you came into a hallway and somebody was a little bit further down it, you may not be able to index off the center line of your body and actually be able to make a successful hit at that point. So now you're just a bullet barrier for everyone behind you. Not exactly what I want to be at that point. I want the ability to be a bullet barrier that can also fight back effectively. So that's where things like this or an MP5 or whatever really come in handy, because you can get it nice and compact and tight in on them and then be able to come through that door and lay it down just like you would with a intermediate caliber semi-automatic rifle, like an AR-15 or so on and so forth. Okay, so room clearing is not necessarily, in my opinion, the shotgun's greatest strength in the world. If you go with something much shorter, you do get a better trade-off with room clearing, but then you also lose the capacity and you wind up spending more time reloading. All right, Murph, well, what about the power? Because for a long time, you have not advocated for handgun cartridges as primary fight stoppers. And that's 100% true. Actually, in many ways, this video is an interesting comparison because neither one of these styles of weapon are something that I actually frequently advocate for. So this is almost like a championship bout on the bottom of my list. And I will maintain that PCCs are inferior fight stoppers as compared to rifles. Shotguns are wonderfully powerful. You can put a lot of energy into a shotgun for the distance that it will engage at, much more than what you would get out of a PCC. The PCC becomes a conscious trade-off of I need something compact, I need something portable, and for me, with this thing running on Glock magazines and me carrying Glock pistols, I now have ammunition interchangeability, magazine interchangeability between myself and another platform. The shotgun is definitely going to end your fight for you pretty quickly. However, when we talk about its manual of arms and we talk about its capacity and the reloads and all that kind of stuff, that's where the shotgun maybe becomes less of a viable option at that point when we get into that simple complexity. Now, something else people will frequently cite as being an advantage of the shotgun is like, well, you can mix all kinds of ammunition in there. You can carry breaching rounds. You can have less than lethal. You can have birdshot, buckshot, slugs, all that kind of stuff. And sure, that's pretty fantastic. However, that comment lacks context, and I really hate hearing that opinion over and over again over the years because I don't think people fully think it through. Specifically when someone talks about like progressive loading in their home defense shotgun. Oh, okay, well, I have my first round is beanbag round, and then my round after that is birdshot, and then buckshot, and then a slug. And that's super cool. A couple of things to consider though. First off, it doesn't make any sense to me to institute your own ROE. If local law does not require you to have to first respond with less than lethal force, then why would you? Especially because less than lethal rounds can still create a lethal outcome. So if you shoot somebody with a beanbag round and it kills them, you still killed them. It doesn't matter if you didn't mean to, because you've shot something at them and it happened to result in death. That's something that we would expect when we shoot somebody with something. The whole idea of using less than lethal rounds is that there's a better probability that it will not kill them if employed properly, if everything goes right. So if you're a professional, a police officer or something like that, you may have to utilize less than lethal rounds as part of your ROE, and that makes sense. I understand that. But from a home defense standpoint, let's say that I wake up in the middle of the night, there turns out that there's bad guys in my house, and I grab this shotgun and I go to face them, and they see that I have a gun, and they decide they want to make a fight out of it, and they start shooting at me. They're shooting at me with lethal force, and I'm responding with my first 2 rounds, if I'm loaded out how I mentioned before with a beanbag round and then like birdshot. My first 2 rounds are not lethal loads. Like, you're gonna have to be pretty close for birdshot to kill somebody. So I'm responding with less lethal options while they're continuing to try to kill me with lethal options. I don't consider that to be a good outcome. It's also like where people go, oh, well, you get a KSG, and then you have 2 different magazine tubes. You have one loaded up with less than lethal, you have one loaded up with buck or something like that. Or maybe you have one with slugs and one with buck. And that's super great as long as you train that, because there are many circumstances where even professionals make mistakes and wind up utilizing the wrong tool at the wrong time. A great case in point is a little while ago, there was a female police officer that was with a bunch of other police officers trying to restrain a suspect, and she yelled, "Taser, taser, taser," and then drew her gun and shot him. To me, that screams, I have been spending more time training with my handgun on the range than I have been going through my ROE of utilizing a taser. And so when that police officer got stressed, got their adrenaline pumping and all that kind of stuff, she grabbed the wrong gun, or she grabbed the wrong tool, and then wound up going from having a less than lethal encounter to a very lethal encounter. You're running that same type of possibility whenever it is that you talk about having mixed loaded ammunition in your gun as well, including the magazine tubes. Because like, oh, cool, hey, I want to shoot that person with buckshot. I'm going to switch away from my less than lethal load over to my buckshot. But what do you have in the chamber at that point? Because if you go and shoot them with a beanbag round when you intended to shoot them with buckshot, like that's not the result that you wanted, and that's potentially not going to help you in the long run. So some things to consider there. I don't consider mixed loading, first off, to be a good choice, and second off, to really be the advantage that people come up with. Now, if you're talking about running this thing, running your shotgun as a breaching team, then sure, you can go ahead and have breaching rounds loaded up in it, conduct your breach, and then the rest of the magazine tube are your lethal loads so that you're ready to be able to take care of whatever it is that pops up. I understand that completely. And there's also procedures where you can have like a couple of slugs on hand, and then you can conduct a real quick ammunition swap in order to be able to send like a single round of a slug wherever it is that you need it to go. There are things that you can work around that are very handy. However, this brings us into our next thing, which is the limited range of both of these options. A shotgun's especially a tactical shotgun that you're supposed to be able to run all different kinds of loads through, a tactical shotgun's about a 100-yard gun. If you were talking about a dedicated slug gun, you'd be able to push it a little bit further, but your tactical shotgun, your reliable engagement distance is going to be about 100 yards. With a 9mm, you could push that out to 200, but at that point, though it's better than throwing rocks, you're effectively throwing rocks. Really, the 9mm is more like a 100-yard gun at best, and probably more realistically, a 50-yard gun is where you want to live at. So neither one of these are necessarily these fantastic long-range options. Okay, but inside of that range, they're pretty good. Well, yes, the shotgun is going to absolutely annihilate anything within 100 yards. And the 9mm is still going to be something that you're not necessarily going to just brush off. No one's going to be like, oh, I'm 100 yards away from that 9mm. I'm okay. That is not the case. It will still kill you. So, with that being the case, where's the real limitation here? And I think the thing that you need to keep in mind, especially if you're talking about being a prepared citizen or you're planning on carrying either one of these weapon systems professionally, you really have to be aware of what your engagement distance is going to look like to begin with. If you're expecting to be living out beyond 100 yards, neither one of these guns are really a good choice. Now, if hey, Murph, these guns were, especially the shotgun, like the 1014 specifically, that was run in Iraq and Afghanistan. And, special forces units used to run like MP5s and stuff like that in Iraq. So, like, what's the problem? Yes, there's a circumstance that might drive you to want to pick those tools for a specific purpose, but realizing that that tool is not able to cover all of the possibilities. So, when we talk about like city fighting in Iraq, Baghdad or Fallujah or something along those lines, there are still long shots. The SPR was developed with urban warfare in mind. So there are still instances in which like being able to shoot further, being able to see further is a really important aspect of warfare. And like, yes, the shotgun was utilized in like Afghanistan, but that was on raids where you dropped off relatively close to the target, went and hit the target, and then exfilled at night when the enemy didn't really have the ability to be able to fight you. These are not necessarily like day raids where, you're somewhere in Afghanistan getting shot at from mountaintop to mountaintop and your shotgun's not reaching. There's a trade-off for all things. It's kind of like if you're a designated marksman, like you're not going to be very good at close range fighting. That's not what you're there for. So when, you guys reach the objective and you decide that you're going to storm the house, you're going to be on the outside pulling security, and that's okay. You're going to hope that no one pops up inside of or too close to you so that you can effectively engage them from a little bit more distance, because that's what your rifle's designed to do. You have to accept those conscious trade-offs. What you have to realize if you're going to utilize a shotgun in more open terrain is that there might be a very long distance or a very long period of time in which you're getting shot at as you try to either close with that opponent or just try to get real small and don't get hit while everyone else takes care of the target. Some stuff that you want to take into consideration whenever it is that you discuss like your squad loadout or something along those lines. Like you got one gun that's not really doing anything in the fight. Be it a shotgun or a PCC, it doesn't really matter, depending on the fight. All right, guys, I think that pretty much covers our comparison portion. Why don't we go ahead and get into the range portion. So, as usual, shot 3 drills. Got some times here and some footage. Now, the first drill is just kind of like a skills warm-up. So this was actually 4 mini drills all combined into one. Now, I shot all 4 of these drills back to back to back to back. However, we're not going to necessarily show them that way so that we can talk about individual aspects of the drills as we go. All right, so for the first drill in our skills warm-up is the now drill, which is I was holding more or less on the target, and then as soon as the timer went off, it was engagement time. Now, for the skills warm-up drill, keep in mind that the Benelli was shot with 3-inch turkey loads. And these were also the first rounds I put through this gun because I just got it the other day. Just borrowed it the other day. All right, so the now drill is more or less holding directly on the target, or like just below it, and then coming up on target and hitting it. So let's go ahead and see how that went. All right, guys, the shotgun did it in 1.60. The PCC did it in 0.78. Now we do have a disparity here where the shotgun is running those 3-inch shells. It's a lot of recoil. It's definitely pushing the muzzle of the gun around a little bit. I'm having more recovery on the sights and all that kind of stuff. But that's what you get for power. Whatever it is that people talk about, like, you know, shotguns being so powerful and all that kind of stuff, then it does equate to more recoil, which could mean more dot jump, which could mean longer splits in between shots and all that kind of stuff. It's one of the things that you have to keep in mind. So I'm sending 115 grain 9mm target rounds out of this PCC, whereas I'm throwing Turkey Magnum rounds out of the 1014. All right, let's go to low ready. So low ready, again, starting from the low ready, popping up 2 rounds, and then we'll see what times are. All right, the shotgun did it in 2.29, with the PCC doing it in 0.98. That is an even larger disparity than before. Now, guys, you will notice that it took me a second to respond to the beep on the shotgun. The wind was absolutely insane in my electronic hearing protection, and I like kind of sat there, like it took a second with all the wind noise and all that kind of stuff for it to process that the timer had gone off. It's okay, it'll balance out before everything is said and done. So the PCC most definitely stomped the shotgun in both of these beginning drills. Now after this, we went to a support low ready. So switched over to my support shoulder for shooting and started at the low ready. And let's go ahead and check out that engagement. All right, the shotgun did it in 2.75 with a miss, however, and the PCC did it in 1.64. Now, a couple things to keep in mind here, guys. This shotgun is very new to me, so I'm still kind of figuring out its manual of arms and all that kind of stuff. So I'm kind of working through some stuff, maybe not necessarily the best showing for the shotgun category in this case, but you know, also keep in mind, guys, I have trained way more extensively with AR-15s and guns with manuals of arms like the AR-15 and the AK and stuff like that, not so much with shotguns, and it's really something that I need to fix. And that's one thing that doing these videos has kind of shown me is where I really need to grow as a shooter, is how I employ shotguns. Now, something else that happened on that particular shot stream was I had a malfunction. It did not cycle the last round. It didn't take very much to fix, but I was very surprised by that. And we'll get into that more here in a minute. All right, so again, the PCC beat out the shotgun in not only time, but also accuracy. The last thing I went to was a 1 reload 1. So let's go ahead and check out how that went. All right, guys, that was a pretty abysmal showing with actually both guns. I was not very happy with the results from either. So the shotgun, I had a reload plan for it, and then as soon as the timer went off, I happily dumped that and went stupid. So that took 6.42. And then with the PCC, for some reason, I put the magazine in my pocket instead of the built-in magazine pouch in my pants, and that also slowed down that reload, causing that gun to do it in 6.17. So the PCC still did it faster, but I wasn't very happy with either showing. So I decided to go ahead and shoot all the other drills that I was going to do, see if there was anything else that I needed to alibi, and then come back and do a mulligan for both guns. So let's go ahead and check out that footage here. All right, guys, so I actually ran that drill with both guns a couple more times, and I decided to go ahead and grab the first time that I did coming back to the drills. So taking the first shotgun, I did 2 drills with the shotgun. I'm going to take the first one of those, and I also took the first one of like the 3 additional drills I did with the PCC. The shotgun did it in 5.13. And the PCC did it in 5.21. Oh, what's up here, Murph? The shotgun beat out the PCC. Now, I will go ahead and say that my fastest time was sub 5 seconds with the PCC, and the shotgun stayed above 5 seconds with both, or actually I think it was like high 4s with the second run that I did. But like, I cut a lot of time off of the additional PCCs with the additional PCC runs. However, let's just go ahead and talk about the raw cut there. Yes, the shotgun was faster. That was faster getting 1 round into it. Now, of course, I only had 1 round loaded into the magazine of the PCC, but I could have loaded 15 rounds into that magazine, and it would have been the same speed regardless. Whereas if I had to take this shotgun from empty to full, the times would have gone from like a very thin margin to a very wide margin very rapidly. This gun would take a while to plus up to full. If we're just doing 1 reload ones, or if let's say did a 1 reload 1 fired, then another target pops up and I had to do that again, like I'm spending a lot of time trying to keep this gun loaded. Whereas I get a 10, 15, 17, 33 round magazine into this gun, and I'm just good to go the entire time up until I run out of that ammunition. And then it's very fast to get another 10, 15, 17, 33 round magazine back into it. All right, guys, that was our skills warm-up. The next drill that I did is what I refer to as scales, which is I start at the left side of my target rack and I go to the right. And in this case, it was going to be 6 rounds, so I was going to do that twice. So let's go ahead and see how that went. All right, guys, as we can tell, that did not go well. I switched to ammunition on the shotgun at this point. I went over to some Winchester target loads. And all of a sudden, I started having a ton of malfunctions. So I went from a very hot hunting load to a very light target load. And this was done in 29-29, by the way. But this is one of the important things to talk about with a shotgun. Pump action shotguns are generally considered to be more reliable than semi-automatic shotguns. However, you can still induce a malfunction in a pump action gun. Most often, it's a shooter-related issue. This gun is supposed to have a self-adjusting gas system. Many semi-automatics are supposed to. All self-adjusting gas systems are not necessarily built the same. However, I was still not very happy with that result, so I ran it again, another 6 rounds, and I continue to have malfunctions. So at this point, I started looking like it was improving though. So I went from failures to extract to failures to eject, but like the gun was starting to cycle a little bit more smoothly. So at this point, I decided to go ahead and put 3 little drops of oil on this bolt, cycle it a few times, and then get back into the game. And at that point, the gun ran flawlessly. So keep in mind, guys, this went from the owner's safe to my truck to my war chest, back into my truck to the range. So I don't know when the last time this gun was maintained. I don't know when the last time the owner shot it. And it very well could have just been very dry. So once I put the lube on it, I ran the drill yet again. And that time I came out with a 5.51 and a miss. Now the miss was caused because, of course, as I was moving down the scales, when I hit the head size target, that thing would completely wrap around the beam of my target rack, and I'm not going to shoot my target rack. So I had to readjust and go re-engage the other 2 steel targets. And in that process, wound up coming up with a miss. So 5.51 with a miss, whereas the PCC did it in 5.06. Now, to be completely honest, guys, I love shooting this little rifle. This thing's an absolute blast to take out on the range. All right, so yet again, the PCC wins and also had fewer malfunctions. All right, now let's go ahead and get to the last drill, which is the Mozambique. So, for those of you who don't know, the Mozambique or failure to stop drill is to the chest, one of the head. Now, I was not going to take my paper target out there, so I didn't want to mess up my cardboard backer. And then in addition to that, with how windy it was, I wasn't even completely confident that I would be able to keep the thing upright. So I did what I refer to as a deconstructed Mozambique, which is I engage my C-zone size steel with 2 rounds and then go over to the head size target and shoot that. So let's go ahead and see how that went. Alright guys, the shotgun did it in 2.40 and the PCC did it in 2.31. Now you might have noticed that there was a little bit of hesitation on the PCC, like the PCC felt like it went a little bit slower, but this trigger is just light and pretty fast on the reset and all that kind of stuff, so it was really easy to be able to stack those nice precise hits very quickly. The 2 guns were very close, and I would actually be really curious to see how fast I could do just a normal Mozambique, because with my deconstructed Mozambique, there's actually more muzzle movement than what you would commonly associate with a Mozambique, because it's supposed to be 2 to the chest, 1 to the head. So this is a pretty, what we're covering like 8 inches here, whereas I was covering a couple of feet going from my C-zone steel to the head size steel. All right, guys, so what are my observations from this data? What did I notice overall? Well, the PCC definitely beat the shotgun in times. But you could also see very tangible examples of how powerful a shotgun is. So the question becomes like, well, how many times, how many rounds are you actually going to have to fire out of that gun? Well, it kind of depends on your situation. If you're in a home defense type situation, some of those like home burglaries look like little moving companies have shown up, like 5 guys getting out of a car and walking in the house and start stealing stuff. You very well might need more capacity to be able to handle that situation, especially if somebody wants to make a fight of it. You might actually run into a circumstance where you need reloads. And that'd be a pretty terrible time to find that out, especially if you haven't been practicing reloads, like, maybe someone we know. Whereas with the PCC, having the higher capacity and being able to stay on target and really own that target and all that kind of stuff would be pretty fantastic. It would be a very positive outcome for you in that situation. If you're talking about a shotgun in duty type use versus the PCC, if you're talking about like a police officer, that's a very difficult thing. The shotgun is the long-time favored long gun of police. Now the PCC and rifles have made more of a presence in recent years, especially ever since the North Hollywood shootout. But I think a shotgun is still definitely a viable option in a police officer's hands as long as certain things are taken into account. I would still prefer to have a rifle. That is like the bottom line up front, is that ultimately I still want a centerfire single projectile rifle cartridge to take into whatever situation it is that I'm going into. That's where my comfort level lies. If you are more comfortable with the shotgun, I can understand selecting that for its other benefits, like its potency and all that kind of stuff. But if, be it a police officer, an armed citizen, or a military entity, you're going to need to get that manual of arms down. You're going to need to spend more time training that stuff in order to be able to get to the same level of proficiency as your AR, which is going to be a lot easier, a lot more efficient in the time spent in order to be able to achieve that type of purpose. That's just my observation overall. What about the PCC, Murph? Well, I still would not say like, oh yeah, you should take a PCC over an AR, except for certain circumstances. I think a PCC really shows its worth on a boat. If you're doing some sort of like boat interdiction or something along those lines where you might be working inside the hull of a ship, I think a PCC has some very tangible benefits over even something chambered in an intermediate cartridge of slightly longer length, and that being muzzle blast. Well, Murph, why is muzzle blast a big issue? A lot of the guys that are doing that boat interdiction stuff have like ear pro on, so it's not like they're going to ring their bells or anything along those lines. And while that might be the case, muzzle blast is not just something that's going to be deafening. You're going to feel, especially in a confined space like the hull of a ship, you're going to feel that blast wave come back. You're going to feel it in your nose. You're going to feel it in like your air-filled cavities and all that kind of stuff. Whereas a PCC is going to have less of that happening. So I could definitely understand, especially if you pair that with a suppressor at that point. Like, I still get effective ballistics inside of the boat, and I also decrease my noise signature, which allows me to better keep my situational awareness instead of dealing with like a pounding headache because I just ripped 10 rounds out of a 10.3 Mark 18. Well, what about the efficacy, Murph? Why wouldn't you take a shotgun instead? Well, because with how quick and easy handling this little rifle is, I actually feel very comfortable, or in your case, if it's a 3 points of contact pistol, I don't really care. I feel very comfortable with the ability to be able to stack headshots with ease. Like, there have been many times in my life where I have trained primarily shooting headshots with a rifle. So this is an instance where I think I would default back to that and would just go to painting somebody's forehead with my dot and slamming a couple of rounds in there and calling it good. Now, I could do that same thing with a shotgun, but my advantage comes in with the size, which I think I've beaten that dead horse quite enough. All right, guys, I think that pretty much covers my thoughts on this particular subject. I hope you guys found this interesting. It's pretty much what I got. Have a good day.